Statistically, about 95% of the runners who start the grueling Boston Marathon, they actually cross the finish line.
95%. Wow, that's incredibly high.
Right, 95%. But if you take elite, heavily trained military recruits and put them in the Delta Force running test, 98% of them fail.
It's such a wild contrast.
It really is. So today we are going to explore why the exact same physical activity running, in this case, can either be a massive personal triumph or just, completely break your spirit.
Yeah,
And more importantly, we're going to look at what that bizarre statistical difference tells us about this silent, insidious career killer we all face, which is burnout.
absolutely.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack Stephan Schiffman's incredible survival guide, Beat Sales Burnout. Maximize sales, minimize stress. We are going to decode what burnout actually is on a biological level, how it secretly sabotages our daily routines, and how to use Schiffman's actionable strategies to basically flip stress from a career killer into a career driver.
And, while Schiffman anchors this book in the high-stakes world of sales, which, by the way, is a brutal field where turnover can hit like 40 to 50%.
Basically.
Yeah, but the mechanics of burnout he uncovers, they are entirely universal.
That is the crucial takeaway for everyone listening today. Whether you are pitching enterprise software, managing a massive creative team, running a small business, or just trying to survive a really demanding corporate job without losing your mind.
Which is most of us.
Right. The insights here about managing rejection, protecting your time, and preserving your emotional energy, they apply directly to you. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can actually beat burnout, we really need to understand what it is on a physical, structural level.
Yeah, that's key.
Because people often use the word burnout as a synonym for just, being tired after a really long week. But the sources show us it is so much more destructive than that.
It's an entirely different beast, really. Schiffman relies on a definition from burnout researchers, Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter. And they don't call it exhaustion. They describe it as an erosion of the human soul.
Man, an erosion of the soul, that is heavy.
It is. It's this dislocation between who people are and what they are forced to do day in and day out.
Yeah.
But to really understand the why behind this soul erosion, we have to look past just the psychology and focus on our actual biology.
Okay, biology. How so?
Well, when you face a highly stressful situation at work, say you're lying awake at 2 a.m., imagining a terrible outcome on a major project, or, I don't know, dreading a meeting with a hostile client. Your brain doesn't know you're just worrying about a spreadsheet.
Right.
It instantly triggers the body's ancient fight-or-flight syndrome.
So your nervous system essentially thinks a saber-toothed tiger just walked into the room.
Precisely. Your body prepares for literal physical combat. It floods your system with adrenaline, your stomach acid spikes, your muscles tense up, your heart rate accelerates. You are biologically primed to either fight the predator to the death or sprint away as fast as humanly possible.
But the reality is you are just sitting in a cubicle.
Exactly. Or on a Zoom call in your living room. You can't literally run out of the building, and you certainly can't, physically fight your boss or your client.
I mean, you shouldn't.
Right, highly discouraged. Because society and professional norms dictate that you sit still, you can't physically release that chemical flood. The tension just stays trapped inside your body, and ironically, it immobilizes you. This biological trap is what Schiffman calls burnout-inducing stress.
It's like revving a car engine while you're parked in neutral.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, you're generating all this incredible noise, heat, and friction inside the engine block, but the transmission isn't engaged. You aren't going anywhere. You're just, burning out the motor from the inside.
That is a perfect visualization. You are wearing down the machinery without making any forward progress. But Schiffman draws a really vital distinction here. There is another kind of stress, which he calls creative stress.
Okay, creative stress.
Yeah, this is tension that you refuse to internalize. So instead of letting the adrenaline trap you in neutral, you use it to build forward momentum.
Give me an example of that.
Sure. Let's say a client is dodging your emails. The burnout-inducing response is to just sit at your desk, stomach churning, agonizing over what you did wrong.
We all been there.
Right. But the creative stress response is using that sudden spike in energy to literally pick up the phone, call the client, and proactively ask for a next step to resolve the ambiguity. You take the biological energy and channel it into a tangible action.
And the source material highlights some surprisingly simple, immediate physical remedies to break that mental loop before it turns into burnout-inducing stress.
Yeah, these are great.
Schiffman argues that because the stress response is physical, you can literally change your emotional state by forcing a change in your physical state.
Make the body lead the mind.
Exactly.
Hmm.
If you get off a terrible phone call or read a disastrous email, don't just slump over your keyboard and stew in it. Stand up, clap your hands loudly, and walk around your office for a minute. You have to aggressively break that neurological pattern.
It sounds almost silly, but it works.
It does. He even brings up this amazing historical example of the legendary actor James Whitmore. Whitmore famously portrayed President Harry Truman,
All right.
and Truman faced some of the most stressful global crises imaginable, right? Massive railroad strikes, the dawn of the Cold War, the decision to use the atom bomb. And Whitmore noted that whenever Truman was hit with a massive crisis, the very first thing he did was stop, plant his feet, and take a massive, deep breath.
What's fascinating here is that taking a deep breath isn't just some, cliche piece of mindfulness advice.
Right.
It's a literal physiological reset button. Deep, diaphragmatic breathing stimulates the vagus nerve, which actually signals your parasympathetic nervous system to calm down.
Wow.
It acts as a circuit breaker for that fight-or-flight adrenaline dump. Once you use these physical tools to manage those immediate bodily symptoms of stress, you are finally in a position to fix the underlying mindset that triggered the panic in the first place.
Makes sense.
And in the professional world, nothing triggers the saber-toothed tiger response faster than rejection.
Oh, the dreaded land of no.
It's the ultimate career hazard. Schiffman calls this the rejection trap. As social creatures, we naturally perceive a no from a client or a boss as a personal failure, right? A direct reflection of our professional worth. We feel it as a literal threat to our survival.
Yeah.
But to avoid burnout, you have to fundamentally reframe rejection. You have to start seeing it not as a personal indictment, but as a benign statistical inevitability. It's just a neutral data point in a longer sequence.
Okay, I have to jump in here because benign statistical inevitability sounds really great in a textbook.
Fair enough.
But let's talk about visceral human reality. I hear what you're saying, but if my mortgage is due and my team's quarterly bonus is riding on getting a yes from this specific client, my brain does not care about statistics.
Right. The stakes are too high.
Exactly. A no feels like a physical threat to my livelihood. How do you actually train yourself out of taking that personally?
It is incredibly difficult because human nature wants to panic. But human nature can be trained. Schiffman addresses this intense pressure by quoting the great New York Yankees outfielder, Mickey Rivers.
Oh.
Rivers used to say, "Ain't no use worrying about things that are under your control, and ain't no use worrying about things that ain't under your control."
I love that.
It sounds folksy, but it's profound stoicism. Schiffman argues that the only way to neutralize the panic of rejection is to enter a state he calls the flow. In the flow, you stop worrying about controlling the prospect's decision because you literally can't. You can only control your response to their decision.
Right.
You realize that a client's no usually has absolutely nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with, say, their internal budget, a sudden change in management, or just terrible timing.
You know, there is this incredible story in the text that perfectly illustrates what being in the flow actually looks like.
Oh, the Charlie story.
Yes, it's about Schiffman's mentor, a guy named Charlie. So Charlie is in this high-stakes meeting, and he is getting completely shut down by a prospect. The prospect is giving him nothing. Stiff body language, one-word answers, just total resistance.
Brutal.
Now, for most of us, when that happens, the fight-or-flight response kicks in hard. We panic, we start talking faster, we raise our pitch, we start desperately reciting the brochure, trying to force the other person to see our value. We try to fight the tiger.
Which almost always pushes the prospect further away because they can smell the desperation.
Exactly. But Charlie is in the flow. He doesn't panic. He doesn't talk faster. Instead, Charlie literally puts down his pen. He drops his defenses entirely, leans forward, looks the prospect in the eye with genuine concern, and asks a completely disarming question.
What does he say?
He says, "Where did I go wrong?" Usually by this point, people see the value, but you have no interest. "I must have done something terribly wrong in my presentation today. Could you tell me what it was?"
There's a brilliant pattern interrupt. He completely removes the pressure of the sale.
And it causes a total 180 in the room. The prospect instantly drops his own defenses, straightens up, and says, "Charlie, the problem isn't you or the presentation. We just had a 3-month budget freeze handed down from corporate. I'd love to use your services, but my hands are tied until next quarter." Right. Because Charlie didn't panic and take the resistance personally, he unearthed the real problem. He ends up closing a deal right there to defer billing until the next quarter. He turned a hard, hostile no into a closed sale simply because he had practiced his response to rejection so thoroughly that it didn't trigger his anxiety.
The flow is really just extreme preparation masquerading as magic.
That's a great way to put it.
When you are that prepared, you aren't desperately trying to force an outcome. You're just executing a process. But, as you pointed out earlier, shifting your mindset around rejection is only half the battle.
Right.
Positive thinking and stoicism alone won't pay the bills. Even if you master the flow and stop taking rejection personally, your brain will still eventually trigger that biological panic if it realizes you are mathematically running out of options to succeed.
Oh, interesting.
You need a structural framework to prevent the emotional roller coaster. And that leads us directly into what Schiffman identifies as the dreaded sales slump.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Schiffman argues that the slump isn't some mysterious curse. It's entirely self-imposed, and it's caused by a failure to understand basic math.
Yes.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this because it completely blew my mind. Let's say you have a pipeline of 20 active prospects and your historical close-in ratio is 1 in 5, meaning for every 5 people you pitch, 1 eventually says yes and 4 say no.
Okay, standard numbers.
You work hard and boom, you close a sale. You celebrate and you logically think to yourself, great, I had 20 prospects, I closed 1, now I have 19 strong prospects left to work with.
But that is a complete mathematical illusion.
It's a really dangerous illusion because your ratio is 1 in 5. Closing that single sale actually means you just consumed an entire batch of 5 prospects.
Right.
You lost the one who bought, and you lost the 4 who statistically have to fall away as the natural collateral damage of getting that one yes. You aren't down to 19 prospects. You are instantly down to 15. The problem is you're so busy celebrating the win that you don't realize your pipeline just shrank by 25%. If you don't immediately replace that entire batch of 5, you are accelerating right toward a mathematical cliff.
A sales slump is really just biological panic resulting from a lack of mathematical awareness.
Exactly.
You wake up weeks later, realize your pipeline is empty, and the tiger is back in the room. The cure to this anxiety is understanding your own performance numbers with absolute surgical precision. Schiffman is famously transparent about his own daily metrics to show how this works as psychological armor.
What are his numbers?
Well, every single day, without fail, he makes exactly 15 prospecting dials. From those 15 dials, he knows statistically he will reach 7 actual decision makers. Out of those 7 conversations, he knows he will secure exactly 1 new appointment.
Okay, very precise.
Very. If he repeats that daily, he gets 5 new appointments a week. He adds in 3 follow-up meetings from previous weeks, giving him 8 face-to-face meetings total. And because he knows his closing ratio is 1 in 8, he knows with absolute undeniable mathematical certainty that his 15 dials a day guarantees him 1 closed sale a week, or 50 a year.
It's just like playing baseball.
How so?
Well, if you track your stats and know your true batting average is, say, .250, then striking out isn't an existential crisis. It's not a reflection of your worth as a human being. It's simply a required mathematical step toward your next hit. You literally cannot get to the hit without going through the strikeouts.
Right.
But if you don't track your stats, every single strikeout feels like the end of your career. It feels like the sky is falling because you have no baseline of reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, mapping your own failure rate down to the decimal completely strips the emotion out of the daily grind. Schiffman knows he will fail 14 times a day on the phone. By making those 14 failures a required ingredient in the formula to get his 1 success, rejection loses all its sting. When someone hangs up on him, it doesn't trigger the fight or flight response because he knows the math.
It's just data point number 4.
Exactly. He knows that if he just hits his 15 dials, the universe will mathematically balance out.
So if the math is that reliable, the obvious question becomes, why do so many smart, capable professionals still fail to hit their numbers? Why do we burn out even when the formula for success is hiding in plain sight?
Yeah.
According to the text, it comes down to a set of destructive daily habits that actively drain our time and energy, ruining the math.
Schiffman identifies 2 massive behavioral traps that destroy our efficiency. The first is selling yourself a bill of goods.
Okay, what does that mean?
This is the psychological trap of lying to yourself about a prospect being a sure thing, just to make your pipeline look healthier than it actually is. We ignore glaring red flags, like a prospect avoiding budget questions, because we crave the short-term emotional comfort of feeling secure.
Oh, we want to believe the math is working.
Right. But living in that fantasy only sets you up for a massive, stressful shock later when the deal inevitably falls apart.
Mm.
The second, and arguably more destructive trap, is what he calls vanity selling.
Vanity selling. The source material spends a lot of time on this. This is when a professional acts like the entire world revolves around them and their company.
Yep.
They walk into a meeting and just deliver a massive pre-rehearsed monologue about how great their product is, how many awards they've won, and all their amazing features. They talk the entire time instead of asking questions to learn what the client is actually struggling with.
It's performance art, not problem solving. Vanity selling is often a defense mechanism. We talk endlessly so we don't have to face the uncomfortable silence of listening.
Wow, that's so true.
And this behavior leads directly to what Schiffman calls the dog and pony show. This is the classic scenario where a prospect says, hey, your stuff sounds interesting. Come back in 8 weeks and give a big presentation to our board.
Oh.
Right. The eager professional gets thrilled, goes back to the office, and spends weeks building 50-page slide decks, writing extensive reports, and pouring immense creative energy into this project without ever securing any real commitment from the other side.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here, because this applies to so much more than just sales.
Sure.
Think about a consultant pitching a strategy, or even someone interviewing for a major promotion. Isn't the whole point of a pitch to show off your expertise? If you want them to trust you, don't you need to perform a little bit and prove you know your stuff? Why is this vanity selling considered so destructive?
Because it exhausts your most precious, non-renewable resource, which is the opportunity to bond and unearth the prospect's real goals. If you are talking for 40 minutes of a 1-hour meeting, you are learning absolutely nothing.
Okay, fair point.
True professionalism isn't about performing a flawless pitch. It's about acting like a diagnostician. It's asking surgical questions to find out how you can help the prospect do what they already do, but better.
Right.
When you do massive amounts of work for an 8 weeks out presentation without securing a mutual commitment like demanding access to the real decision maker beforehand, you were putting all your energy into a void. When they inevitably say no after your huge presentation, the burnout you feel is crushing because your effort was wildly asymmetrical to their actual interest.
Okay, so to permanently banish these bad habits, to stop lying to ourselves, to stop vanity selling, and to keep the math working in our favor, Schiffman says we need a visual system. We need a structural tool that forces us to be honest with ourselves every single day.
Yes.
And this brings us back to that incredible analogy we teased at the top of the show, comparing the Boston Marathon to the military's elite Delta Force.
It's a stark comparison that perfectly explains the root cause of systemic burnout.
It really is. Remember the stats. 95% of runners finish the Boston Marathon, a grueling 26.2-mile physical ordeal. But in the Delta Force running test, 98% of elite, highly conditioned recruits fail.
The difference isn't the physical fitness of the runners, it's the structure of the goal.
Exactly. The Boston Marathon has a clearly defined, measurable finish line. You know exactly where you are mile by mile. You can pace yourself because you know when the pain will end.
Yeah.
But the Delta Force recruits are given an entirely different psychological test. They were simply told to run until you can't run anymore.
That sounds miserable.
There is no finish line, there is no feedback loop, and the text proves that unquantifiable goals directly cause the mind to give up long before the body does. You just collapse.
Think about how deeply that applies to the corporate world. The Delta Force test is the exact trap most managers put their teams in, and honestly, it's the trap we put ourselves in.
We really do.
We are told to work harder, sell more, be more innovative. Those are Delta Force goals. They are completely unquantifiable, never-ending demands, and they lead straight to exhaustion because you can never actually cross a finish line.
Wow.
To fix this, Schiffman introduces the prospect management system, which is designed to act as your daily marathon finish line. It's a literal, visual 6-column board that tracks reality, not fantasy.
The 6 columns are beautifully simple. Opportunity, first appointment, 25%, 50%, 90%, and closed. Every potential project or deal you're working on goes on this board.
Right.
And the absolute magic of this system, the mechanism that prevents you from selling yourself a bill of goods, happens in the 50% column.
The 50% column is the graveyard of lies. It is the ultimate reality check.
I love that. Graveyard of lies.
In most businesses, people want to say a deal or a project has a 50-50 chance of happening just because they had one really pleasant meeting and everyone smiled. But Schiffman says, absolutely not. To put a name in this column, you must prove 4 highly specific, objective things.
Okay, what are they?
1, you must be talking to the actual decision maker who can sign the check, not a gatekeeper. 2, you must be talking about a specific plan that actually fits their stated needs. 3, actual dollars and budgets must have been discussed out loud.
That's a big one.
Huge. And 4, you must be within your average sales cycle timeline, meaning if it usually takes you a month to close a deal and it's been 6 months, they aren't at 50%.
And there is one more critical rule, which is the linchpin of the whole system. To stay in the 50% column, you must have a scheduled next step.
Yes.
This isn't a vague, we'll touch base next week.
Right.
It has to be a literal date and time on the calendar to speak again, agreed to by both parties. If you do not have that solid next step, Schiffman says that prospect drops all the way back to the beginning of the board, to the opportunity column.
Ouch.
Right. It doesn't matter if the meeting felt like a massive success. No next step means no momentum, period.
So what does this all mean? It means that this system is the ultimate stress reducer because it completely removes ambiguity from your workday. You simply cannot fake your way through it.
Yeah, you can't lie to yourself or your manager about having a sure thing if the prospect isn't sitting in the 50% or 90% column with every single strict criterion met. It forces you to deal entirely in reality.
That makes total sense.
It creates immense psychological relief because it prevents that terrible end-of-quarter panic where you suddenly look at your pipeline and realize it was just a mirage of pleasant conversations. And that panic is the exact mechanism that causes so much professional burnout.
It turns the lights back on. So recapping our deep dive today, beating burnout isn't about retreating to a quiet room and magically avoiding all stress.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the biology of stress and turning immobilizing panic, that fight or flight trap, into forward-moving creative action.
Okay.
Whether you are selling enterprise software, interviewing for a new role, or just trying to navigate a complex internal project at your company, the rules remain the same.
Always. You need measurable mathematical goals to neutralize the pain of rejection. You need to focus on diagnosing the other person's needs instead of performing vanity pitches, and you need the absolute discipline to track your own reality through an honest, unyielding system.
This raises an important question, one that gets to the very heart of how we interact with adversity every single day.
Okay.
The next time you face a massive rejection, a closed door, or a seemingly impossible roadblock, whether in business or in your personal life, what would happen if, instead of letting the biological panic take over and walking away in defeat, you simply paused?
Yeah.
What if you dropped your defenses, looked at the situation objectively, and asked, where did I go wrong? The answer to that simple question might just give you the exact map you need to succeed next time.
Just like Charlie putting down the pen, what a fantastic way to reframe the struggle. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these strategies, find your own baseline numbers, and go run your marathon with a clear finish line. We'll see you next time.